Hello, everyone. I am Christy Oliver, the Professional Development Manager at Davis Publications. Thank you all for joining us today. We are thrilled to be partnering with the International Society of Education Through Art, or InSEA, to host this conversation with Dr. Lisa Kay. A few quick housekeeping things before we get started. We would love for you to ask questions throughout our time together. The best way to do that is to type your questions into the chat box or use the Q&A button. Both can be found at the bottom of your screen. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout the session, and Dr. Kay will address as many questions as she can during our time together. We would also love to know more about all of our participants. If you would like to, please say hello and tell us where you are logging in from using the chat. And I can see lots of wonderful people here already this morning. Again, thank you so much for joining us. At the end of the session today, we will be providing you with a chance to win a digital copy of Dr. Kay's InSEA-endorsed book titled Therapeutic Approaches in Art Education. So please stay tuned for those details just after the Q&A portion of our webinar. Also, just a reminder that we are recording this session and the video will be available for viewing in a few short days at davisart.com/free-resources. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn it over to our InSEA partners who will continue the introductions and provide context for our discussion today.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from the other side of the globe. Here I am in the heart of Europe, in the capital of Hungary, Budapest. It's already 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Good morning and good afternoon, as you will take it. This is a festive celebration here as well of a committed colleague and the growing network of a professional group. My name is Gabriella Pataky. I'm responsible for art teacher training in Hungary at ELTE University, and I'm also an elected World Councilor at InSEA, the International Society for Art Education Through Art, in my second term, and I would like to welcome you on this long-awaited day on behalf of our InSEA Society, which is the biggest community of art educators in the world. This is a celebration of a great InSEA member of our colleague Lisa Kay, who wrote a significant InSEA-endorsed book. I owe my first professional connection with Lisa to InSEA, and my deeper interest in art therapy broadened due to my endless conversations with her and Anikó Illés. During her Fulbright time in Budapest, more details about which are coming soon from Anikó, I didn't only get to know her commitment, but also her innovative views through her tirelessness in her work, the organization of her students' workshops and exhibitions, and through the support also she provided for the 2011 InSEA World Congress held in Budapest. This led to me enhance my teacher training students being exposed to this area of constantly growing relevance. The importance of art therapy is clear for people becoming art teachers. Their interest is extensive, but unfortunately, it still doesn't yet have a notable position in teacher training as it should be. We shouldn't need such a difficult time as a pandemic to see that the increasing demand for this is not only because of the development of the diagnostic methods, as we hear it often, too often from decision makers. People of the 21st century, regardless of gender or age or medical status, need more and more art therapy as a result of the stark lifestyle changes as well. I'm really happy to be part of this event today, and I wish luck for Lisa Kay and Suzie Horváth. And it's my pleasure to give the word to Anikó Illés.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you, Gabriella. And I want to join to Gabriella on sharing my thoughts that how happy we are to have the opportunity to initialize this book launch and this conversation, and the issues which we will poke around today They are very important for us, and especially for me as someone who is a psychologist in general, but responsible for teacher training programs in Budapest at Moholy-Nagy University of Art and Design. And I'm very, very happy to be here because these topics, art, psychology, education, therapy, theory and practice together are very important approaches and topics, and I'm very happy that we can dedicate some time all together to have conversation on these topics. And Lisa Kay was the author of the book we had the opportunity to speak about, and I have known Lisa since 2011, when she, as Gabriella mentioned, she was a Fulbright scholar at our university, and I was the very proud host of her. And since then, we sometimes continuously, sometimes just occasionally, but keep in touch, and we want to keep on our professional network. And I have learned a lot from Lisa Kay, why she was here in Budapest. And the most important thing I could learn from her is the freedom of using tools, which are mostly artistic tools, but art in a very wide sense, and to apply all the objects, all the materials, everything, every thoughts and feelings, and you can integrate all together to work very professionally. And this is a key point, that the freedom of using multiple materials and working on different and multiple disciplines, it doesn't mean that you can do anything. And this book is very serious about that. Anyone who wants to work with art and therapy together must have a solid background on the theoretical aspects as well. What does theory mean? What does therapy mean? What is a trauma or anything, and all the related concepts and theories. And this freedom and committed attitude, I think this is all together the strongest point of this book for me. And I'm very happy to greet Lisa Kay about her book. And I'm also very proud that one of my PhD students, who just freshly defended her thesis in this year, January, she will launch the questions, and she will have the conversation with Lisa Kay. Suzie Horváth or Zsuzsanna Horváth has dedicated her PhD years to study and practice movements and dance therapy. And we will see that Lisa's background is rather visual, and Suzie's is rather dance and movement, but they really share the attitude and commitment on the importance on using therapeutic approaches in art education. Thank you for being with us, and please, Suzie, keep on.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anikó, Tony, Christy, Gabi, and thanks, Lisa, for the opportunity of reading your book. It was a real pleasure and very stimulating, and also made me think over my practical and theoretical work and methods. So thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to ask you about the influential ideas you mentioned in chapter 4, entitled Foundations and Intersections of Art Therapy and Art Education. Certain influential ideas appear from the field of art therapy, mainly creativity and internalization and externalization, and art healing in medicine, art as visual language. So my question is that which of them do you find the most important, and how does it intersect the field of art education?
Great. Thank you very much, Suzie. Before I start, I want to thank all of you for these lovely introductions, and I'd also like to acknowledge Heather Fountain is with us today, and Heather was the editor of this book, and we worked very, very closely together. So I just wanted everyone to know that Heather is a part of this conversation too, and really was a supportive member of this process of, from the very beginning. So back to your questions about the ideas from art therapy that I feel are most important and how they intersect. The two that I think are the most obvious are art as visual language. This can be a framework for viewing, organizing, and understanding personal phenomenon in art education. In art therapy, we encourage people to connect with their visual language through personal symbols and images. And I think that can also happens in art education. We have a different goal in art education than we have in art therapy for connecting with the visual language. I think the second is creativity and the creative process. And this in art involves play and experimentation. This can be a liberating and playful encounter for our students, not always. In art therapy, the creative actions are a way to create sometimes or create form and order out of the chaotic parts of our lives. And as people begin to make and think and feel and learn, these connections, these points of connections come together. And through their visual language, they begin to see new awarenesses about their place in the world and relationships. And I do believe this happens in art education as well. I also wanted to point out the image on the slide kind of looks at some of the intersections that I write about. This is a model of art therapy, an transdisciplinary model. And you will see there's education, there's psychology, there's art processes and art techniques. There's biological understandings and sociocultural constructs. And these are also different things that we're looking at in art education as well.
Thank you. I see. Thank you, Lisa, for your detailed answer. I definitely agree with you. As a dance movement therapist and special education teacher, I find also creativity one of our most essential, influential ideas, because as you mentioned, as you wrote in your book, creativity is about playing and experimentation. So, in both in therapeutical and educational field. So thank you again. Now let's move on to our next topic and next question. You have shared several personal experiences within the chapters, for example, having worked in hospitals and special education schools as well. And as you explained in chapter 5, entitled Curricular Framework, the basic tenets are based on these experiences. So my question is, which of these basic tenets, principles maybe, would you emphasize for art teachers working in integration or inclusion, and for those who work in special education schools?
Great, thank you. I think the most, well, they're all important, but every student is an artist. I really, really believe that. And in special education settings and in inclusive education settings, sometimes students don't feel like they've got artistic ability and talent. So viewing all students as artists is certainly one way to approach that. When I did research for this book, and I was working with some adolescent girls, one of the ways I connected with this, or helped them connect with themselves with an artist, is they picked artists female artists pseudonyms. And we studied female artists, we studied a little art history, their stories, and they began to connect with the personal narratives of the artists, but also they could like put on an artist persona. And so they would sign their work with one of these artists' names. So, I mean, that's one small way, but it's our attitude, it's our view of our students in beginning and seeing them from the beginning as artists. I think another important tenet that I outline in that chapter is being choice-based, child-centric, and student-driven. The more options and choices we can give students, I think it gives them sort of permission and to create work that's meaningful for them. We're guiding the curriculum, we're guiding what we're doing based on their needs, not necessarily our needs. And I think this can be done even when we've got curricular standards that we have to meet. We can still build in choice in our lessons and focus on students and student choice and have them help us guide where we're going in the lessons and in the curriculum. Coupled with that is a strengths-based approach coming from positive psychology. Certainly, if we accentuate students' strengths, that's going to emphasize the positive and support their growth and development. Another important tenet that I talk about is empathy, is having empathy for our students and where they are in their life experience. Who we are really matters more than what we do. So developing a sense of empathy with our students and a real deep connection goes a long way, I think, in working and encouraging students to develop their own art practices. Another point that I wanted to make is, that I talk about is art as a normalizing experience, especially with kids that are in special education schools. Their lives are often abnormal and with lots of challenges, a lot of stress, a lot of conflict. So somehow, if we can make art a normalizing experience for them, I think that is an important frame that we can put around our curriculum. Another important aspect that I emphasize is connecting through the senses. And this is especially important with our students who have special needs. And it's a way that they can connect with an art experience through their sight and smell and touch and taste. I found working with students in that way helps them gather ideas and sort of it's a nice springboard for art making. Another thing I'd like to comment on is also on the slide. These are some other aspects that I think are important. Teacher personality or teacher personal qualities, attitudes, and expectations. Empathy falls into that category. Having some sense of limits and structure and boundaries are really important in a special education setting. Suzie, I'm sure you've experienced that. You give students choice, you give emphasize a lot of these other tenets, but you've got to kind of create some boundaries in order and sort of let's see, frame that with some sort of discipline, like, you know, here our guidelines, our rules. And these ideas come from the work of Judy Rubin, and she calls these her framework for freedom and creative expression. Judy is one of my art therapy mentors, and if some of you are interested in art therapy, I would highly recommend some of Judy's work. So does that help answer your question? It's pretty broad. And I think these are practices that many art teachers are engaged in. but they may not see this as a therapeutic framework. So kind of included many things like this.
Yeah, I think so. And it was a really detailed answer and a really good answer. In addition to your answer, but maybe it's just the Hungarian specific, I think I would emphasize empowerment in special education schools, as you wrote in your book, because institutional culture in Hungarian special schools is rather based on protection than decision making or empowerment. So that's why choice making and decision making, as you mentioned, it's really, really important in special needs education in special education schools. So thank you, this grounded and detailed answer, Lisa.
I do agree with that, and I meant to mention that I feel like if we do empower students and help them have a sense of agency through choice, that they can begin to feel and believe that they're capable and powerful and have control over their decision-making process. And I feel like in the art classroom is a perfect place, or in a creative arts practice, whether it's music, it can get in other settings, it's a little, or classes, it's a little bit harder, but I think you can definitely do it in art education.
Thanks. Thanks. I definitely agree. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so now let's move to another subject. I would like to reflect on the recent situation in the world with my next question. So, forced by the present situation regarding COVID-19 and the pandemic, most of the educational and therapy sessions are held online, and it seems we need to prepare for that in the future as well. So my question is that can the art experiences from your playbook be applied to online space? And if yes, could you please give us an example for how to use them online?
Great. Well, I've had the experience doing this this last semester. I'm teaching online. I teach a special needs in art education K-12, and I teach an art therapy fieldwork capstone course for graduating seniors. And I've been using the playbook in both of those classes. And it's a little bit challenging, like all of us are making adjustments to how we teach. But they're pretty easy to adapt and use in an online space. So some of the suggestions or some of the things that I have used are the play sheets that I have in the book, specifically making special. This is sort of based on the work of Ellen Dissanayake, the anthropologist, who talks about the biological need we have to make things special. And very in the play sheets, and we've got some of the play sheets on the screen, they're really a nice warm-up for students to begin to gather their ideas. And that's the feedback I've gotten from students in my classes this semester. So I call them play sheets instead of worksheets. Worksheets, this sounds so hard. I like to emphasize the concept of play. So sketching out ideas, playing with ideas, and then picking one to develop a more complex work of art. Another one that has been very successful is the play sheet that I've got, or the exercise on beauty and ugliness. And some of my research that I did in Hungary during my Fulbright kind of developed this particular lesson. That one in particular, again, it's an exercise where students can begin to think about things that they see that are ugly in their world, things that are beautiful, they have the choice to draw whatever they prefer, any colors they want to use. And there's some questions on the play sheets that after they've done the artwork that they can discuss, or you can talk about. Very adaptable to the online space. Before I talk about a couple of others, I just wanted to mention the adjustments that I've made, and I imagine we've all been making, or materials, because I outlined specific materials that I've used when I did this research and developed this book. But I give students even a wider latitude because they may not have those materials at home in their home studios. So making adaptations of size and materials. Sometimes students will do these in their sketchbooks, but it's there. They seem to naturally be able to be used in the online setting. Two others that I wanted to just mention that I've used this semester are looking back and looking forward, especially right now when I'm working with graduating seniors in college. They are looking where they've come from and where they're going. But I think no matter where we are in our life's journey or life's path, we can look behind and look forward to our future or set goals. Another one that I've got in the playbook is called Window of Dreams, hopes and wishes and fantasies, just imagining, again, things that they want and wish for in their future. And this seems to be a nice metaphor, if you will, for students to kind of think about different ideas, brainstorm, and then pick one to develop into a piece of artwork. And I look forward to hearing how other people may be adapting and using some of the playbook and play sheets.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lisa. Your solutions and the examples are really, really inspiring. I think I will think it over how I can improve my skills in my special field, dance movement. So sounds really, really interesting and exciting. Thank you very much. And it was also reading the play sheet and hearing from the playbook. Thank you.
It'd be
inspiring
interesting for me to see how these could be transformed into a movement or performance piece. Yeah. That these could also be a springboard for those ideas to take them and dance them out, or create a movement piece or a play or a story. So yeah,
yes,
where our creativity as educators comes in.
Yes,
there's no recipe, but you can take some of my work and my ideas and move them forward.
Yes, sure. Thank you. And theater and performance and the music also that you wrote it in your book so much, so many times. So thanks. I would like to turn to the topic of participation, if it's okay. So participation of students, meaning physical presence as well as attention in artwork is essential. And in therapeutic approach, there is always a possibility to be absent or to be present, but say no to an activity. Mm-hmm. What is your methodology to help and support students' appearance and involvement in art sessions, experiences and sessions?
Well, so some of this is going to be a little repetitive, but I think it's important to mention things again. We've got to be making meaningful connections with our students' lives and our curriculum and lessons, because if we're not, then we're going to lose them. There are a lot of different reasons why students might be resistant or don't want to participate, and if they don't want to participate, that's okay. I sometimes find that giving students their space, I think that's really important, and letting them go off sort of on their own, and that they'll be curious and they'll come back. But forcing them and pushing them is just not gonna yield much benefit, and certainly not much participation from students. I think, again, having the sensory connections, helping them see those, make those is important. We talked about limits and structure. That's important. Who we are, developing a sense of empathy, but also being willing to adapt the lesson and modify the lesson and negotiate with the students, and coming back to the idea of choice. Giving them more options will certainly help them engage. But again, giving them permission to have a pass for a day for whatever reason, that's important too. Asking them questions, what they would like to do instead, is a part of this adaptation, modification, negotiation process. Does that help answer your question?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa. These are really important aspects of the practical side of your and our work. Thank you very much. In dance movement therapy sessions, students also have the possibility to say no to an activity or be absent, of course. And most of the time I use quite simple techniques like what you mentioned, conversation or some group activities, popular exercises, and what they want to do. So thank you very much. It's very inspiring. Thank you. I have another question about education and therapy to discuss, both from educational and therapeutical perspective. One of the most relevant topics is students' agency. So how can we make our students be able to transform their experiences obtained from the art teacher and the classroom activities and the safe space into their out-of-school life and relationships? So again, how can we make them transform their experiences into their out-of-school life and their relationships?
This is a really difficult question to answer and measure. I don't think we can make our students do anything. We can hope that there are going to be some connections that they're going to make and they're going to apply to their lives. Sometimes we just don't know if we're reaching them. We don't know how these experiences are going to translate. When I was practicing as a therapist in a hospital and in schools, you just sort of, you didn't know if this was going to be the only session that you were going to have with that particular person, or if it was the only time they were going to be in a group. And I just like to think that I had this one opportunity, and going to do my best to help this person participate, get engaged, get involved. And that sometime down the road in the future, if I didn't see it that particular day or in that particular context, that somewhere in the future that they would begin to put these connections together. I know a lot of us have had students that have reached out to us after they've graduated and told us things that we had no idea the impact that the experience with us or in the class or in even a group situation in therapy had impact. So sometimes that's how we know. And I'd be curious what other people think about this, on Anikó, Gabriella. anyone even on the call today. This is a really tough question, I think. How does this translate into students' lives? We may see it in the classroom, in their relationships with peers. We may see a change in their relationships with us. We may see changes in their art making. But as far as what's going on in the future or outside of the classroom, maybe we get a report from a parent that they've noticed something different. Other teachers in the school. But yeah, that's a really interesting one and a tough one for me to answer. So I'm curious, anybody have any thoughts to add?
Thank you, Lisa. I agree with you. Maybe I try to say something before other listeners come in. So I think it's a tough and serious question. And similarly to you, I have always relied on the method of working in groups and the therapy sessions, and hope that the students' experiences could be so intense and deep that they can interiorize them easily. But I need more and more experiences to have any answer to this question. So
well, I think also there's a developmental piece in this as well, depending what age group we're talking about also. So they might experience growth at a later stage and gain the benefit. We just might not, might not see it and hear it in the moment. Yeah.
We have some comments on this as well. I'll read for you. So Mary Alice Arnold says there's often a latency to student development. We give them quality exposures and later, maybe much later, they are able to adapt them to their lives.
Excellent.
June Waters says families report improved mood and willingness to participate in activities at home after art programs. That's good. And Heather Fountain is adding, giving students permission to deal with things in their life within their art practice in the classroom sometimes creates a bridge between the two, but otherwise you may not know until much later.
Thank you.
So we definitely have time for one or two more questions if you'd like to continue.
Thanks. I would like to ask you, Lisa, about groups and group dynamics. The importance of classes or groups has been mentioned several times in your book, in chapter 3 particularly. And my question is that how do you think theoretical knowledge of small groups, such as group dynamics, group roles, or group identity from social psychology, could help the daily work of art teachers?
Well, most definitely. This is important, and I think in a lot, certainly in the United States, students get coursework in educational psychology, learn about ideas about a group process, stages of group development, building trust, group roles, group norms. I think these are really important for us to understand. And also working with small groups, peer feedback, peer decision making. Certainly there's a lot of literature and talk certainly in education about peer pressure, but peer pressure can be negative, peer pressure can be a positive force in small group work. Certainly involving a lot of collaboration is important, I think, in the art classroom. The other point that I wanted to make or bring up, this is I guess it's from psychology, but more even from group therapy, but there are some curative aspects of working in groups. There's a book called The Theory and Practice of Group Psychotherapy, and there are 11 curative factors. And I've been thinking about these in one of my classes this semester, and also how they align with resiliency, art and resiliency. But some of the factors that are really curative or beneficial in groups are a sense of universality, that when we're working together, we're all in this together. So if it's a tough topic that we're talking about or making art about, there's a sense of installation or instilling, not installing, hope. Socialization, really important in a group process. Interpersonal learning is key, and that certainly happens in groups when we have students work in small groups on group projects. And a sense of group cohesiveness and connection that kind of loops back to building trust between a teacher and classroom, but taking time to develop that early on in a classroom, I think is critical for some of these other dynamics that you speak about to be helpful to our teachers.
There is a question here, Lisa, asking if you could expand a little bit upon what you mean by normalcy.
By normalcy? From something earlier that I said, art making is a normalizing experience?
Yes, the notion of normalizing in the art experience.
Okay. The best example that I have for that is a situation that goes back many years, but when I worked on a pediatric unit in a hospital, and I had a child that was dying of a brain tumor. And while this child was losing a lot of his abilities, he became paralyzed on one side of his body. He was restricted in a lot of the things that he could do. But when he came into the hospital, he wanted to make art. And by art is a normalizing experiences, even though all these really tragic and life-threatening events are going on around him, or they were going on around him, we were able to continue to make art. Some of the same things he was doing in his art classroom, we were doing in a hospital setting. So that's kind of what I mean, is that art can sort of normalize. It is an experience that developmentally students are having, and we progress along a developmental sort of schema, or not thinking of the right word. I'm blanking, but that's kind of what I mean by that, is that yeah, come back to the art, come back to the sort of the basic needs, kind of thinking back to Ellen Dissanayaka's, that we have this biological need to create. And that's what I mean by that. That makes sense?
Yes, thank you. We do have some time. Suzie, if you want to ask another question.
Yeah, sure, thanks. Thanks. I would like to turn to the topics of self-reflection and self-care. These subjects are recurring topics all over the chapters, especially in chapter 7, entitled Taking Care of Others and Ourselves. So you mentioned several techniques, art making and yoga and mindfulness, but the supervision and the group work with colleagues seem to be missing for some reason. So my first question is that, is supervision available in the US for educators and educational institutions? And what do you think about supervision as a supporting technique?
Absolutely. And in our pre-service teacher training, we embed this in the program, and certainly reflection is critical. Also, early career professionals, there's a mentoring process in many school districts, and I think across the United States, I can't speak for all the states, it's kind of a little bit different process, but and I know here in Pennsylvania, there's a group in Philadelphia called the Philadelphia Art Teachers Alliance. And this is a group that's just come together on their own to provide support. It's not formal supervision like in clinical psychology or even in art therapy graduate training. And after someone is practicing as a therapist, ongoing supervision is a really important aspect of the work to help us process what we're experiencing. And when I write in the book about creating visual notes and making artwork and reflecting about that, just think it's really critical for the work that we do, that we understand ourselves and understand the experiences that we're having that are challenging with students, especially now. Teachers are faced with a lot of challenges that pre-COVID art teachers were faced with a lot of challenges. So I do think it's really, really important. And I imagine people can maybe weigh in on that in the chat. I think I guess for me, it's important not only for the neophyte educator and neophyte therapist, but the experience, someone that's been practicing for a while. This is kind of a lifelong learning experience because we're all at different places in our lives. And we can grow from this peer supervision and professional supervision, whether it's formal or whether it's informal. It's really important.
Thank you very much for the answer, Lisa. It was really interesting to hear some new information for me about the system in the US. In Hungary, we have a well-grounded supervision system for therapists, but unfortunately, it is missing from the educational system, similar to the US. And I agree with you. I think it would be a great supporting technique, as you mentioned, and it could prevent teachers from burning out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so thanks. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm curious in other parts of the world and even within the United States. I mean, it's going to be different in certain. The states will dictate some of this at the pre-service level, and certainly there's ongoing continuing education, but it's something I think people choose to do because they need it for themselves. I know a while back I did professional development for a school district in Illinois before I moved to Philadelphia. And I always built in the self-care and the self-reflective aspect of it. But the way I had to write it up for the district to approve it, it couldn't have teacher self-care in it or teacher reflection in it. So we just worked around that. I built it into the all-day workshops anyway. And we continued having them year after year because teachers found them very useful. Because we don't often get time to take a breather and stop and reflect on what we're doing and also nourish ourselves and engage in art making as self-care. As teachers were developing lessons, we're engaging students, we're involved in this practice, but we're not involved sometimes in the making ourselves. So I would always involve art making in group settings and give people opportunities to kind of share ideas and feelings and thoughts that way. It wasn't therapy, but it was a way to come together and reflect and
Yeah.
do a little peer supervision.
Yes. I think so. I agree. Thank you, Lisa.
Well, we've got time to answer some questions. Oh, Anikó, do you want to add? Go, please. Yes.
Yes, I would like to join to these last issues because Lisa mentioned several times the concept reflection, and I think it's a keyword in being a teacher and also for therapists. But I'm really curious that how you mean that. Is there any difference between a reflective processes as an educator and as a therapist, or maybe it has no sense, I don't know, but I'm really curious on your opinion on this question.
I'm not sure I understand the question, Anikó.
That you mentioned several times that reflection is very, very important, but as I understand well, reflection is it's a continuous process for a teacher, and it's also a continuous task for a therapist as well, but maybe in a different way. And you are always on the borders of therapy and education. And I would rather ask you, what do you think? What are the differences between therapy and education in general? But it would take a lot of time, I guess. So maybe we can just get closer with this concept, reflection. Do you think when I have to understand how I taught or how I did therapy, it's a different processes?
Well, I think the goals of therapy and our art therapy and art education are different. So maybe I'm reflecting on my relationships with students. Maybe I'm reflecting on in the classroom, things that are that touch me in a deep way, to try to understand some of the relational dynamics. I mean, we do that in therapy also, but we're doing that to understand where we have our therapeutic goals. We're looking at therapeutic change. Our goals in art education are different. Our goals and objectives are different. But that reflection piece, we have to still understand our relationships to our students, to our classes, our own feelings. Sometimes there can be something that happens in the classroom that touches a deep part of ourselves and affects the way we react and relate to our students. And we have to understand and separate, is this me? Is this something that's going on deep inside me? Or is this something, that student is projecting, to use psychological terms, on me? So it has to do with our goals and objectives of education and therapy. But I kind of circle back to this idea that I feel like with all the trauma in our world, as art educators, we need to understand these aspects even more, because students are bringing some of those experiences into the classroom, especially in art classroom where they have more freedom and choice. The students to reflect on their lives, even if a lesson is not focused on some early childhood experience, maybe they bring that into the classroom. I don't know if that answered your question.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
That actually leads in really nice to our next question, which is, it seems the fields of art therapy and art education are sometimes at odds in the wake of working to validate each. How might art therapists and art educators work together to advance and advocate for the therapeutic benefits of art?
Perfect question. Thank you for asking that. One of the things that I think we can do is collaborate and work on projects together, do research together, invite art therapists into your professional development at your schools is one way. Yeah, it's really important to have these conversations because there is plenty of room for all of us to work together in schools. There are many, again, right now I'm focused in Philadelphia and what's going on in Pennsylvania. I do know in Philadelphia there are school art therapists that are working with art teachers. Sometimes there are art therapists that can come in and you can collaborate on a special project in your classroom. When I was in Illinois, I would invite artists through arts councils to come in and work with kids with special needs. So, I mean, that's another way. There are many art therapists that would love to team with art teachers. And I guess another point I'd like to make is we just gotta continue, we need to continue to open up dialogue and conversations between the two fields. And I do that every opportunity I can with my art therapy colleagues because they don't, and this is a generalization I will all make, but they aren't up to date in contemporary art education practice. So they don't know a lot of the work that art educators are doing. So we have to teach them also that our practice has evolved beyond DBAE, because there are some art teachers that are art therapists who were educated. Their art education came from that perspective. So they're not aware of some of the other trends and practices in contemporary art education. So the dialogue needs to go both ways. I'd encourage people to reach out to their local art therapy organization. There are art therapists practicing all over the world. So certainly you can, have a conversation and just ask that question and see where can we start with working together. It can be mutually beneficial.
Excellent. And do art therapists need special training? And if so, is it in the arts, art education, psychology, or another field?
Absolutely, yes. Art therapists' entrance into the field of art therapy is at the master's level. And I'm speaking in the United States. I know in Hungary, Anikó has taught me about the practice of art psychologists in Hungary, and in Europe and different places. It's different in the United States. It's a 60 credit hour master's program, involves a lot of supervision, as Suzie has asked about, a lot of clinical internships, examinations, board certification examinations. The coursework is going to combine psychology, it's going to combine counseling, there's a strong art component. Some programs are situated within departments of art education. I know Florida State University has an art education department, and their art therapy program is under that. At Tyler School of Art and Architecture, I am chair of art education and community arts practices, and we have an undergraduate art therapy program underneath this umbrella of art education. So yeah, that's a rigorous training, a lot of courses in psychology, yeah, would go beyond what I have written about is a therapeutic approach. It is not, it doesn't make someone an art therapist if they use this approach or this practice. If that's something you're interested in, I'd encourage you to check out the American Art Therapy Association. There are international, I think on Facebook, one of my colleagues, Kathy Malchiotti, has a Facebook group, an international art therapy group. She's doing a lot of training. But yeah, most definitely it's post baccalaureate work. Oh, and by the way, and then you get registered as an art therapist, and you get an ATR, art therapy registered, and then you also are board certified after taking this exam. And in some states in the United States, there's licensure for art therapists, or you get licensed as a clinical professional counselor. Great, thank you.
Great. We have some questions about how to best facilitate student choice, specifically when teaching virtually in elementary and middle school settings.
Ooh, that's difficult. That's difficult because of the preparation that it takes for you. But if you can build that into your delivery and your lessons, that's the best thing I can offer. I know when I've done some of the play sheets and from the playbook, I think even last week I presented a lot of the different themes and choices, and then gave students, let them pick which one they wanted to work on. And I must admit I was scrambling a little bit because I had to find the play sheets on my computer. I didn't have all of them available. And we were emailing back and forth. I was uploading things to Canvas. So it's tricky. It's really tricky. And I'm not sure I'm the best person right now to address that, since I'm not practicing teaching in the elementary classroom or a middle school classroom right now. So there may be someone on the call that can offer more suggestions than I can to that question. I do know from seeing our student teachers, I do know it's challenging because it's like you have to do double preparation. You've got to have even more plans outlined to present to students. And it also depends on the materials that they have available at home, which is everyone's kind of dealing with that in different ways.
Yeah, I think you're right on, Lisa. And I had the pleasure of being on a webinar presentation by another Davis author, Melissa Purty, recently, who was speaking about choice-based approaches in a virtual time. And one of the things that she said that stuck with me was, even though some schools are providing kits and materials for students at home, you really don't know what they have or if they even have access to those items that you sent home or if they receive them at home. So providing things that are open-ended where they can use whatever they have and whatever tools are available, I think are key to providing engaging experiences for them, and working with them one-on-one to troubleshoot when they're not sure what to do or how to move forward. So those were just some of the things that she mentioned. And if you're interested in digging into choice specifically further, I did add into the chat, Davis has two really fantastic books on the choice-based approach written by Melissa Purty and Ian Sands. And those are The Open Art Room and Making Artists. So we've got some, and they also have some free webinars available that you can watch. So if you're interested in choice, I would strongly suggest you check those out. But we also have some questions here about grading and assessment and putting pressure on students and teachers that in trying to assess can often be at odds with the therapeutic benefits of the art making process. So do you have any suggestions for how to navigate that struggle?
Well, one thing that I do is I bring students into the assessment process for sure. Evaluate yourself and give yourself a grade. And we negotiate. A lot of times students are harder on themselves than I am. But that's one way to do that. And certainly in therapeutic settings, when I was working in special education schools, we didn't give grades, but every day there were like behavioral assessments that were used. And so that's another challenge. Yeah, if you want to have students, if you want to focus on assessment, if you have to focus on assessment, can you kind of going back to what Christy said, Christy, excuse me, can it be a little bit more fluid and flexible and open-ended, even in your assessment process, to sort of leave room for these therapeutic choices and therapeutic approaches for students? I know grades matter. Grades are important to students. And when I give them this flexibility and choice, sometimes they don't know what to do with it. And just to add to this, I've been thinking about this a lot for this semester, and there have been extraordinary challenges for all of us and for a lot of the students in my classes. And I'm going to be much more lenient. And I've been catching myself when I've wanted to come down a little bit harder on a student for being late. And for not being as thorough and not following the rubric or the syllabus and all of that. But I'm realizing, now our students are just pulled in so many directions, and they're zoomed out. They're exhausted. They're really exhausted, and they're trying really the best that they can to meet the standards and guidelines. So that's just where my thoughts are right now, is being as flexible and engaging students in the grading process.
Excellent. And thank you, Heather, for reminding us that in the book Differentiated Instruction in Art, there's a whole chapter about assessment and how to include students in that process. I popped the link for that book also into the chat, and there's lots, if you're interested in assessment or differentiated instruction, please check that one out. Both Therapeutic Approaches in Art Education and Differentiated Instruction in Art are both available in digital versions as well, which is really great for our friends that are all over the globe today. All right. So we do have a few museum educators present, and I want to make sure that we address this question, about museum education and their role specifically. How can museum education departments develop therapeutically beneficial programming? Do you have any thoughts about therapeutic benefits of exploring pieces of artwork in conjunction with creating artwork?
Oh, absolutely. And that's something that I used to do. I had a girls group in a special ed school, and I would bring in artwork, and we would have conversations and discussions about artwork. And again, they would have a choice of which piece they wanted to use kind of as a inspiration for a piece of artwork. But it's a wonderful way to begin to make connections with students and have students talk about their own lives. It almost always happens. The other thing that I just wanted to suggest too is that one thing that's happened in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia Museum of Art is that they have teamed with art therapists. The museum education department is teamed with local art therapists to develop programming. So I would certainly encourage that as an option. And I'd be happy to connect you with some folks that I know, so you can kind of find out what direction that they went. They would develop programming both for their staff at the museum, but also for the public that had therapeutic benefits. Good question.
There's a question here also about program evaluation. With everything needing to be measured, what are some examples of how you can evaluate and report on the success of your programs? And are goals set as they are in individual education plans?
Okay, so program assessment and goals. Can you repeat that? I just want
to Yes. With everything needing to be measured, what are some examples of how you evaluate and report on the success of programs? Are their goals set as they are in individual education plans?
Since I do understand the need for measurement. And we can do that in some of our programs with surveys and questionnaires. But I find the most, useful are the qualitative measures in valuable and program evaluation. I've just gone through probably 3 years ago, a major program review at the university level, and using examples of artwork, using examples of students' report of their experience, were pretty telling and useful, along with some of the data. So I would just suggest, trying to balance out the two. I don't know if that's exactly what you're after, but I think we can, kind of like Elliot Eisner talks about the benefits of art. Our art, the qualitative nature of art is really important, and that can, I think, give us a wider picture, or in a broader picture, of the benefits of the programs that we're involved in, and certainly the artwork and comments, stories, personal narratives explain a lot more in a deeper way. So that's what I would suggest, trying to figure out a way to incorporate that. Also, when I'm working on a program evaluation and reports like that, it's a more creative approach, and so I like to bring in the arts and the visual and the narrative, the personal narratives, to tell the story. And I think it's more engaging to those that are also looking at the report.
Great. We do have a question here about the book specifically and its intended audience. Is there an age group that the book is intended for? Can average families use it with their children at home, or was it intended for children with special needs in special schools?
Good question. The research for the book was done with adolescents. I had, I think, someone like as young as 11 to 19 that were involved in testing the curricular framework. So I think it can be adapted to younger kids by sort of breaking down the steps a little bit more, and even simplifying some of the lessons. But I think it can be used across the K through 16 spectrum for sure. And I think parents could use it at home with their children and families. It'd be really interesting to see how a family might approach it, especially if family members are across the spectrum age-wise, and kind of see where students take the assignments or take the lessons. Yeah.
Excellent. So we would like to take a minute to tell people about the resources we have available that are linked with this wonderful work by Dr. K and the book specifically. We have, again, the InSEA-endorsed book by Dr. K titled Therapeutic Approaches in Art Education, which is available now in both print and digital versions. And you can head over to davisart.com/therapeutic to check it out. There you can read a sample chapter of the book and view the table of contents. We'll also be posting a recording of this webinar in case you want to revisit it or share it with your friends and colleagues. In addition, we have professional development webinars, 2 of which are available for free, and they cover the foundations and intersections of art education and art therapy, and Self-Care for Art Teachers, the Visual Notes Project. The other 2 are on trauma-informed practice and taking care of others and ourselves, which has even more self-care information and lots of practical guidance. Those are available for purchase on our site and can be purchased also in a bundle with the book for a discounted rate. So definitely head over to davisart.com/therapeutic to view those. We also would love to give away a free copy of this InSEA-endorsed book. So if you are comfortable sharing how you're practicing artful self-care, please tag us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can see the handles there, and you will be entered into a drawing for a free digital copy of Dr. K's book, Therapeutic Approaches in Art Education. We will pull a winner from those entries on November 18th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you are interested in grabbing the book and want to share some self-care, please definitely enter that. We also have a lot of free resources available through Davis Publications. So you can access these anytime for yourself or for teachers that you work with. If you head over to davisart.com/free resources, you'll be able to sign up for our upcoming webinars. You can sign up for a free trial of the Davis digital platform. You can access free professional development sessions, read School Arts Magazine online, and view some of our on-demand video lessons. We've also put together some great resources on equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as teaching art online. Please also watch our social channels for announcements about our upcoming webinars. Our next session, co-sponsored with Art21, will be on December 9th at 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll have Davis author Joe Fusaro, along with Amber Arnold from Atlanta, Georgia, Jennifer Bockerman from Lincoln, Nebraska, and Alex Mendes from Chicago, Illinois. They will be speaking about the various ways they incorporate contemporary art into middle school art teaching. So please join us for that session and definitely share with any middle level art teachers you know. A special thanks to our partner for this webinar, InSEA, and to Gabriella, Anikó, Suzie, and Lisa for participating in this important conversation today. We really appreciate your willingness to share your experience and expertise and all of the time that you have spent with us today. I want to thank all of our attendees. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you all stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you again soon.